Great. Okay, friends, we're going to get started. We are going to attempt to record this, but we don't have a lot of faith in the system. So we're glad you're here. My name is Leah Zimmer. I'm the Executive Director of International Student Scholar Affairs. And we're super glad you guys are here because I'm hoping that this session with our colleague Concha is going to make the Social Security number or ITIN process a lot easier for you. I just want to give you a heads up that we are going to be talking about applying for a Social Security number. We're going to be talking about eligibility for a Social Security number. We're going to be talking about the I-10 process if you are not eligible for a Social Security number. Concha's going to talk a little bit about filing taxes, but we will have more workshops in the spring when you are all going to do that. And then I'll talk a little bit about getting a state ID or driver's license and how that connects to the Social Security number. But in 2 weeks, we actually have a much more extensive driving in the US session that we'll tell you about. So I'm going to turn it over to Concha. I have collected everyone's questions if you RSVP'd. So we'll answer most of them in the presentation. We'll answer some of them at the end. One of the things that we said at orientation, if this rang in your ears that may not have been true, is that everyone has to apply for an SSN or an I-10. And Concha is going to explain who needs to apply for an SSN and who's eligible and who needs to apply for an I-10. So a few of you may not actually need to apply for either, but everyone in here is going to have to file taxes in the spring. So we aren't going to ask you to identify yourselves and what your situation is. We're just going to do a broad sweep for the next 45, 50 minutes. My colleague Dulce and my colleague Cynthia and I are all here from ISSA. And so at the end of the presentation, we are going to stay and answer any questions. Concha will stay and answer any questions that you have. So just know we'll be here as long as it takes to help you out. So I'm going to hand it over to Concha. Super excited. She's from the Notre Dame tax office, Notre Dame alum as a grad and an undergrad. So she probably has something in common with 98% of you in here. So yay.
Thank you. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for having me today. And thank you so much for coming on this beautiful sunny day that feels like a nice fall day. We're here. There we go. So my name is Concha Prado Grimmer. I'm a member here of our university's tax department. And we're talking about today is which tax ID is right for me, right? Trying to make it rhyme so it sticks. Let's see. So now it doesn't work. Oh, it didn't refresh. Some technical difficulties here. Okay. So there's two types of these tax identification numbers. We have the Social Security number. You'll see it referred to a lot as SSN. And then you will see we have the individual tax identification number, ITIN. So you'll see here the difference between both of them is kind of put in bold, right? One is employment-based and one is not employment-based. So if you have employment earnings, meaning you have a job here on campus, you will likely qualify for a US SSN. And then if you have any other type of income in the US or are filing a tax return for any other reason, then you'll be qualifying for this ITIN. All right. And I just wanted to make sure we clarify, the reason why I'm standing here as a tax person talking about SSN and ITIN is because these are tax identification numbers, right? So in the US, we use our SSNs for a lot of different things, including credit cards and driver's license. And if you try to open up a new phone line, they'll ask you for your social security number. But these are actually, it's a tax identification number, right? So it's not really meant to, like, it's in some countries, these numbers happen to be like the voting cards or something like that. This is just for tax. So, you know, as I'll mention later, once you get your card, it's important that you don't carry around with you. So we just wanted to kind of bring some clarity of what these numbers are. They're tax related. So we'll get to that. So who in the US, what kind of visitors will need a US tax ID? Obviously, if you're a US citizen or a permanent resident, you'll likely need a tax ID to file your tax returns. But also US visitors in the US with US income will have to file tax ID. But also if you maybe don't have income, but you qualify as a dependent of a resident alien spouse or a US person that will be filing a tax return and will be claiming you as a dependent, then you also need to apply for this number. So, you know, I said, okay, if you have US source income, you're able to apply for a tax ID. So what is US source income? For US visitors, US source income will be any income that you receive in the US for either employment, for services rendered in the United States. So if you have a job on campus, those services are being performed in the US, and therefore that income that you earn, those wages or that salary is going to be deemed US source income. And then also another type of income that I usually see with our students is a non-qualified scholarship income. So this brings a lot of confusion because they're like, okay, well, I'm getting a scholarship. Is that so? Immediately I think I have taxable income. So if you have a scholarship that covers anything other than tuition, then you have US source income. If the scholarship is just covering your tuition or like just a certain amount of your tuition, that would be okay. You're not considered to have taxable US source income, so you will not need to apply for a US tax ID, okay? It's only if you're receiving a scholarship in excess of that tuition or a grant specifically to travel or specifically to be used for anything that is not tuition. Then you have income and you should be considering to apply for a US ITIN. So you basically have two types then, right? You determine that you need to apply for a US ITIN because you have US source income. So you're either going to follow two different steps. You're either going to have US employment income, which automatically will qualify you to apply for a social security number, or you're going to have the other type of income, as I mentioned, the scholarship and the scholarships that cover anything other than tuition. If you have that other case, if you can't apply for a social security number, then the default is always then apply for an ITIN. But you can only apply for an ITIN if you have employment. So what are the steps for applying for an ITIN? So as I mentioned, it's employment based. So step 0 I put in here is you always want to check with ISSA if you're an F or a J student, if you're allowed to work, all right? It can be a violation to your visa status if you work without having the proper authorization. So you want to make sure you're in the clear. All right, once you are ready to start your job on campus, you know, you want to complete form SS5, which is like a PDF form that you can print out and either, you know, and complete by hand. Obtain an employment letter from your department, and then you'll get an ISSA confirmation letter via ISSA link. This letter will kind of confirm, you know, that you're here on that status, that you're abiding by all the rules and regulations of your status. And then you'll need your passport, your visa, your I-94 record, and your I-20 or a DS 2019. And then once you have everything that you need, you can visit, you know, you have to go in person with all the physical copies of the documents listed in the previous step, and you have to go visit the Social Security Administration office. Just to note that you'll have to wait 14 days after you have checked in with ISSA. If you're a new student and you have done your original check-in, you'll have to wait 14 days to begin this application process. The Social Security Administration has like a way to check with the CVIS system. So you have to give them enough time for them to communicate and not, create any problems with your application. So, and this is just an excerpt, the specific documents that you need may change with your visa status and the specific type of work you'll be performing. So if like a CPT, OPT, on campus, off campus. So you want to definitely refer to the ISSA website. You see how they have a great chart out there. Definitely recommend while you're completing and gathering all your documents, go to this website on the ISSA website and make sure, you can see here, okay, what's my visa type? What kind of employment I'm going to be having. And they'll even let you know if you're eligible for the Social Security number and exactly what documents you'll have to bring with you to the Social Security Administration office.
And I will just say with this employment letter, this is coming from your supervisor and it has to be on letterhead. So one of the things that we are screening when you submit the request for the ISSA confirmation letter is that you have everything in hand and it's correct for the visit to the Social Security Administration. They're very strict. So this employment letter, there is a template here. Your supervisor needs to use this template. They need to put it on department letterhead. And then you are going to upload that to ISSA link to get the ISSA confirmation letter. And like Concha said, this is only for students who are paid for on-campus employment. If you are getting a scholarship, a room and board scholarship, you would not do this, right? Because you're not going to be eligible for the SSN. This is only for an on-campus job. Maybe you're doing the I-9 for that job. If you are going to do CPT or OPT in the future, there are different documents for that. But for this case, and we will at the end of this give you time to just open up that SS5 and look at it before you leave so you can ask us questions about the application.
Julia, that's a great point. Yes, absolutely. So also a question I get a lot is there's sometimes a confusion about stipends. So a lot of graduate students, I don't know if we have any graduate students in the room, but sometimes, stipends, you're like not sure if it's a scholarship or if it goes as income. Basically a good rule of thumb, as Leah said, was if you go and you do an I-9 with the Office of Human Resources, it's considered a job. So it'll be marked as employment. So if you've done an I-9 or have been requested to perform an I-9 with the Office of Human Resources, then it's likely then you have a job, you're SSN eligible, okay? So you can apply from any local Social Security Administration office. We usually say, it's usually easier for our students to go to the local Social Security Administration office in downtown South Bend. It's accessible via the bus. So you have the bus route that leaves from right here in Library Circle. It's bus number 7, and it'll take you right to like the main bus stop downtown. And it's literally across the street is the Social Security Administration office. You'll have to make sure that when you go, make sure you bring all your original documents, just double, triple check. You want to make sure you have everything you need while you're there. So after you complete your interview at the Social Security Administration office, you'll have to receive your Social Security card in the mail. So once you leave, I think they give you a little slip of paper saying that they received your application, but they don't give you your Social Security card. They'll send your Social Security card after. And one note that I always want to say is like, if you don't receive your Social Security card within about a month of your visit to the Social Security office, you should be asking some questions. There's a lot of identity theft, and sometimes it is related to your Social Security card and that information that's with the Social Security office. So you want to make sure if you never got it, make sure you go back and ask, because the Social Security office will consider it already like issued. So they'll think you already have your number and then you have that number and you'll be expected to use it. you can't reapply for a social security number. Once they give it to you, it's for a lifetime. So if it gets lost in the mail, just be sure, just kind of have that in the back of your head. If you haven't received it in about a month, maybe you should call and see, hey, have you guys sent me my card yet? Because I've had some students who have like misplaced their card. And so it's something that they have to look into. And if they wait, the longer you wait, the harder it'll be. So I just wanted to say that. But once you receive your social security card, which will look a little bit like the one down below, you can enter it on Inside ND, doing just like a search for form W9S, and you can enter it into the system, or you can bring the social security card with you to the Office of Human Resources and they can enter it into the system. You never want to divulge this number, your social security number, via email or, share pictures with it with other people. Like, this is sensitive information. You should keep this in a safe place and not share this electronically, okay? So if you go to the Social Security office and they deem you not eligible for a social security number, what should you do? Then, or if you know you don't have employment income, then you won't qualify for a social security number, you should apply for an ITIN. So there's two ways to apply for an ITIN. You can apply for an ITIN before you file your tax return. So like while you're earning the income, or you can apply with it when you are ready to file your tax return, and you can apply for it with your tax return at the end. It'll be a different process for people applying early if you have an ITIN with a scholarship when you're claiming a treaty, or if you're applying for a scholarship without treaty. Everyone can apply for an SSN with their tax return, but I will say that it will delay the process of receiving any refunds because they'll have to first send the IRS, have to send the IRS first to that processing department for the ITIN, and then they'll have to process your ITIN and then send everything to the processing department for the tax return. So if you are able to apply early, I strongly would suggest that you do, so that you have that number and it'll make your tax filing experience a little easier. But if you don't apply early, it's not the end of the world. So, a lot of people do this, and it's perfectly fine. It's part of the process to also do it with your tax returns. So how do you apply before you file for the tax return? You'll complete this form W7, which is it's the application for an ITIN. So similar to the SS5, this is the ITIN version of that form. It's on PDF. And then once you complete that form, you'll know what kind of documents you'll need to gather. So you'll need your Form I-20, a copy of your passport, copy of your visa, and your I-94 record. If you're applying for a treaty, you'll notice you have to add a couple more things. You'll need this Form W-8-BEN, which is also found on the IRS website. And you'll need a scholarship letter. So it could be your financial aid letter, something that shows that you'll be receiving, that scholarship income we discussed earlier. And then you can request a certification letter from ISSA using ISSA link. And just note that you'll have to mail the original letter that they provide. So once you gather all these documents, you'll mail them, keep copies for your records, and you'll mail them to the address listed here, but also listed on the form instructions, okay? Yes. Copies of the official documents, like, to the Social Security office, you'll take the original documents, but you'll get to take them back with you. Since you're mailing this to the IRS, you'll just mail the copies. Keep your original documents, okay? So here I'm listing some countries that have treaties available for the scholarship income. So when you're applying for that ITIN and you may wish to use a scholarship exception, here are a few that I've listed that have this scholarship income. I have also in here, are we going to share the slides with them, Leah? Yeah, so I have linked here the IRS website. They have a nice chart that kind of summarizes. I went ahead and I highlighted what column you're looking for. You're going to look for this column 2 on that chart with the IRS that has that code 16. So that will be all the scholarship income treaty articles, and it will let you know exactly, depending on what country, what exact treaty article is the one that you'll have to put on the form. And then here's one where you're applying with the tax return. You notice that there's a few more steps in this process than if you're applying early. So you have to first prepare your tax return, then you'll prepare your form W-7, which you prepared in the you prepare regardless because that's the application for an ITIN. Then you'll gather the documents, which is the same documents, but now you'll have to get them certified. So you can either get them certified by visiting the local IRS Taxpayer Assistance Center, so it's like a local IRS office. They can certify the documents for you, but you'll have to bring your original, similar to like how you do with the Social Security office. And if you're not able to go to the IRS Taxpayer Assistance Center, then you can also help you at the tax department. We'll be able to certify those documents for you. However, I will note that going to the IRS Taxpayer Assistance Center is preferable because it expedites the process a lot more than when we certify the documents in our department. Once you have all these steps completed, once again, you kind of like make copies for your records. You won't send any of the original documents with your application. And then, so you make all the requested copies, you have everything certified, and then you mail all these documents, including your tax return, to the IRS at that same address listed below. The U.S. visitors who are dependents and are going to be filing as dependents for other, resident alien filers, they must use this process. So if you're planning on claiming a spouse for, usually you'll know, I think I'm getting ahead of myself here because you might not be super familiar, but if you happen to have a dependent, this is the way you have to file. You might not know how to, you won't know if you'll be able to claim a dependent until you file your tax return. So just keep that in mind. But if you file your tax return and you find that you'll be claiming a dependent, these are the steps you'll have to follow. So I have some screenshots here of what Form W-7 looks like and how to it should be kind of pre-filled if you're looking to complete one. You can find this form on the IRS website, but you'll notice that you have that button checked for applying for a new ITIN. And then usually what you qualify for, what we see our students qualify for is item F as a non-resident alien student, professor filing a U.S. tax return or claiming an exception. And then you also then should check line H and list the exceptions. There's 2 exceptions, one for the treaty benefits and one without. And then you would complete that field if you're claiming a treaty. And then in the next page, you'll see you just kind of have to enter all your information. You'll notice that they have a mailing address line. It's important that if you complete this form, you write in the correct mailing address because your ITIN will be mailed to you, just like the Social Security number is mailed. So you want to make sure you have the appropriate address there. But you would complete it, and then you want to make sure you kind of sign where I've kind of have this box. So after you file, a couple of weeks after, once you're approved, you'll receive that IRS notice with your ITIN number on it. You'll want to keep that notice for your records. You can, again, enter, similar to the Social Security number, enter this number on Inside ND using that form W-9S. And you can email the tax department at ndtax@nd.edu to let us know that you have submitted your ITIN through Inside ND, so we can make sure that we have all your tax forms updated to have this ITIN on file. Just to note, as I mentioned, Social Security number is for life. So once you apply and you receive your Social Security number, it will be that same number in your lifetime. They will, it's very difficult that they would reissue a Social Security number. An ITIN, on the other hand, if you do not file any tax returns with an ITIN for 3 years, then it expires. So, if you get an ITIN first because you weren't working that first year you were here, but then you became Social Security number eligible, right? You're eligible, you got a job on campus, and now you can have a Social Security number. Then you must apply for the Social Security number and use the Social Security number moving forward. But then the ITIN, you just won't continue filing it. So in 2 years, 3 years of not using the ITIN, it will expire. There's nothing else you need to do. It'll just kind of fade away on its own.
If you're an undergrad, we have undergrads who are at the university for 4 years and never get a Social Security number. So there's not a requirement. Grad students, more likely, you might have a job as stipends, but undergrads are here for the full years and don't get the Social Security. The important thing is with the I-10 is that if you're getting any other funding that isn't a job from the university or another U.S. source, then you're going to want to do this I-10 process, which is why we go over both of them. If we have exchange students, ASAP students who are just here for a semester or the year, if you are being funded by the university or if you are going to get a job on campus, these things all apply to you, even though you aren't going to be degree seeking. So just a note about that.
Yeah, that's a good note. Yeah. And then here's a little bit about our tax filing requirements. So all international, if you're here present in an F1 or J1 visa, during the calendar year, you'll have a tax filing requirement, even if you didn't have any income. You won't probably file a tax return, but you will have a document to file. If you don't have any income, the document you file does not require you to have either a Social Security number or an ITIN. But if you have income, the document you file, the tax return you file, will require that you have an ITIN or a Social Security number, which is why we're kind of telling you ahead of time so you can prepare if you do have that income and know that you'll have to apply for a taxpayer ID. So if you do not have any income, again, I said it's a kind of a simpler form. You don't need a taxpayer ID. If you do have income, the tax year for all individuals is for the calendar year. So we'll record your income up until the end of the year. And then in January next year, you will receive, if you're working on campus, you will receive a form called W-2 from the university, and it will report all your earnings for the calendar year, all the tax withholdings for the calendar year, and it will have or should have your Social Security number on the form. If you do not have the Social Security number on the form, you'll have to kind of request that it be reprinted so that you can file your tax returns. If you still haven't received your Social Security number by the time these forms were printed, you probably will have to wait until you receive your Social Security number so that you can file your tax returns. Another form that you can see here is you can receive a Form 1042-S. Those are for the students who are receiving other types of income or they're claiming a tax treaty. So if you have an ITIN, it's likely then that you'll get a Form 1042-S. So if you're going to apply for an ITIN, you probably should be expecting a Form 1042-S in the spring. So just thought you guys would know. So eventually, after you receive these forms, then you can start preparing your tax returns. The university usually has an agreement with Spring Tax and has some codes available for students and scholars to use the Spring Tax preparation software, which is a website that guides you step by step on how to prepare tax returns for people who are not US citizens or US residents. And we'll talk about this more in our session for tax returns. We don't want to give you too much at one time, but just kind of want you guys to know what you can expect. And then in the spring, when it's tax filing time, we'll reconvene once again and kind of go on like the next steps. So if you have a job on campus, though, you should have received an email to complete your FNIS profile. So I think this is just my shameless plug because I'm the face behind the email. And I just wanted to just kind of remind you, if you haven't done so already, or if you didn't receive the email to complete your FNIS profile and you have a job on campus, please email fntax@nd.edu, and we'll get you set up with an account. It's important that we receive this information just so we can make sure that your tax withholdings are set up appropriately, and we can make sure that you don't owe a large amount of taxes when you do file your tax return. I sometimes get a lot of questions for foreign students. Like, hey, you know, I'm foreign, like I don't have to pay US tax. Well, unfortunately, because you're working in the US, it is US source income. And so since it's earned here, it's taxed here. So all the payments are subject to US income tax and tax withholding unless a treaty applies. And so I just wanted to let you know that there are some treaties available, but in order to claim the treaty exemption, you must have a social security number. So it's important that you apply for this number, and then you can take advantage of all the other tools that are available for you. So I think yeah. So this is another list of countries. These are countries with treaty for employment income. The last slide I shared was scholarship income. So this would be the countries that have student compensation articles. So if you are a student and you are a resident of one of these countries, then you may be able to apply for a treaty exemption. All right. And if you received that FNIS email, it did list the link to our website there. So you can read the specific treaties and what you need to complete to receive this exemption. Okay, this is.
So Concha is talking a lot about federal taxes, and I mentioned this at orientation, is that because you're in Indiana, you're also going to be responsible for state taxes. And fortunately, she had those tax rates up on the last slide, but we will send you lots of information in January about applying and filing your taxes. For those of you, if you have realized you are not eligible for an SSN or the ITIN, then the form 8843 is actually what you are going to file. So you're not going to have to pay taxes, but you are going to have to file a tax form. So this will come back up. I'll transition to, because a few people in the had questions about applying for an Indiana ID or a driver's license, and the social security number is a really important part of that application with the Bureau of Motor Vehicles. For those of you who weren't in the room, I did say in 2 weeks, we're going to have a virtual session on driving in the US that goes into much more detail about the process. But for today, I just wanted to highlight some of the documentation that you're going to need for a state ID or the driver's license, because it includes the social security number or a letter of ineligibility from the Social Security Administration. The ITIN is actually not going to help you apply for a state ID or a driver's license. You have to have the Social Security number or a letter of ineligibility from the Social Security office. So that is, these are the main documents that you would need whether you want to apply for a state ID. And that just makes it a little bit easier to not walk around with your passport locally and have that access. If you move in the future, you'll apply for a state ID in your other state. If you have just moved here from another state, generally you have to apply for a state ID based on your residency. We had a student who really loved being a resident of Ohio and lived in Indiana for 3 years using his Ohio driver's license, and that is technically illegal. We do not recommend it. So if you want a state ID, a driver's license, a driver's permit, because you're going to learn how to drive in Indiana, all of those require these documents. And we'll see if this works. This is a breakdown of what documents might be needed. So you need documents that prove your identity, which is just going to be your passport, visa. They are also going to require your I-94 record at the BMV. So you want to make sure that's accurate. You are going to, again, there's a section of documents proving lawful status in the US. These are going to be the same documents. They're serving two purposes. You are going to need a document proving the social security number. And again, that's either going to be the social security number card that Concha showed us the photo of earlier, or a letter of ineligibility. And the application process that she outlined for the social security number is identical to get the letter of ineligibility. So you have to still do the SS5 application. You still have to have you don't have to have letters from ISSA or an employer. You have to have that SS5, your passport, visa, all of that in order to apply for the letter of ineligibility. Or if you have had an SSN in a previous life, you already have that, and you have a pay stub from Notre Dame that has that SSN, then you could use that. Doesn't usually apply. Lastly, in order to get the driver's license or the state ID, you're going to have documents proving your residency in Indiana. And so if you are living in a residence hall, that might be an enrollment verification report from the registrar. It might be that you signed up for a phone and that phone bill came to you electronically. You're going to print that off. If you are living off campus, it might be an electric bill. If you've just gotten your first paycheck from Notre Dame, then it could be that pay stub, but something that has your Indiana address, you're going to need 2 of those documents for that license. So these are just a few questions. We've just talked a little bit about that state ID process. You are going to go to the BMV. You're going to get your SSN or your SSN ineligibility letter, and then you're going to apply for the state ID. A student submitted this question: how do I get an SSN without a job offer from an on-campus job? And you cannot. You have to have a job offer letter and that employment letter from your supervisor to get the ISSA confirmation letter. You're going to take both of those to the SSA. The other thing to note is your start date has to be within 30 days. So if you are like, I don't really have time to apply for the social security number right now, I'm going to wait, and you quit that job, you are no longer eligible to apply for an SSN. So you have to be working or have started the job within 30 days in order to be able to apply for the SSN. And it starts with submitting that employment letter to our office, to the ISSA office in ISSA Link. One student said, what information should we consider to file your taxes? Again, we're going to go over this much more, but really what Concha explained is the university is going to send you that W-2 in January that highlights all of the income you earned from the university or all of your scholarship income or fellowship income. They're going to document that for you. There are not other things that you need to track for taxes generally at your life stage. So those are the main things. The university is going to track that. It's going to help you to have the SSN or the I-10 to complete the process. We talked a little bit about if you're going to start a job this week on campus, then you need to get from your supervisor that letter of employment. Again, the template is on our website. We'll give you guys time to find it, put it on letterhead for your department, and submit that to ISSA Link. And I don't think there's any exceptions for postdoc fellowships. Those are going to be for scholars. Yeah.
So postdoc fellowship will end up classifying as employment income, and then the same kind of steps apply to what we've discussed here. Yeah.
There's a few questions about F2. So if you're in here as an F2, we will talk to you specifically because I think that's just a minority of people, but we'll talk to you about your specific situation as an F2. Again, Concha did answer, it's not necessary, and you may not be eligible as an F2. So it's always important to ask the questions about eligibility. And again, I'm just going to repeat this because it comes to us a lot, is if you are going to buy a car, if you're going to get a driver's license, you're going to get a state ID, you have to have that SSN or a letter from the SSA saying that you are not eligible for the SSN. So those are the big ones. As you consider your questions, again, Cynthia, Dulce, Concha, thank you so much for being here today to go over this. And myself will be here to answer specific individual questions. What I would recommend is that if you are going to be applying for the SSN and you have not already looked at the application, that SS5, that you Google the SS5 right now, take a look at it while we're all here to look at it with you. If you have an employment letter, you haven't submitted it to ISSA link, you're not sure, we are here, we can look at that. If you are going to be applying for an ITIN, then I would suggest you Google the W7, look at it right now, fill that out. We are here to answer questions and to look at that with you. And there's a lot of expertise. If you have not submitted the ISSA link form for the SSN letter, this is the time to do it. We'll be here. We can help you look at that while you're doing it. So now that we've said all that, are there any questions that people think are kind of general questions about what we've talked about? Dulce can ask a question, even though you're going to ask her questions in a couple of minutes. Yep.
So if the student is still employed, they're still SSN eligible, they should apply for a social security number. As soon as they realize, like, I forgot, run, get your stuff together and run with a security number. And if they're done working, they're no longer SSA eligible. And when they file their tax return, they're going to have to apply for an ITIN. For like working on campus?
We'll go back to that slide. Here.
So it was,
It's right here.
so it's like several different taxes that there's like different taxes that will apply, so you'll have to pay
You have to add all of that
all of
together.
those together. And you see this one is a range. So it's not a specific number. I give you a range because it depends. It's not a flat percentage in the United States. So this is only on your earnings. So it will only apply to what you're earning. So whatever you pay on tuition, like, does not offset what you're earning on this. So it will, like, you'll still see, like, every time you get paid, you will see a little bit amount like that's kind of like taken away. So it doesn't get to your bank account, it gets prepaid towards your taxes every pay period. And so you might kind of see these on your pay stub. You can see a statement on what you earn on inside of D. Once you start working and you get your first paycheck, I recommend going to inside NG and looking for pay statement. And it'll tell you what you earned that pay period and what is getting taken out to prepay your taxes. And then all that will be summarized when we give you your form W2. It'll have like everything we paid for during the year and then everything you guys paid to the IRS or the Indiana Department of Revenue. And then you guys could be able to calculate what you owe, but that will be when you prepare your tax return.
And the hope is that you get a little bit back in the spring after you have filed. So they'll kind of assess the whole picture based on, because Notre Dame is also paying taxes, you're paying taxes, and then the hope is in the spring you'll get a little bit back. Never a guarantee.
We try to get it, but that's why if you haven't completed Finesse, please complete your FNIS profile. It's very important. Okay.
Because it's much harder to get to the spring and have to pay for it. You don't want to do that.
So some students may be, it'll depend. So yes, you might not see the Medicare despite the fact. It depends on how many classes you're enrolled on. All right, that would be the first thing. The second is if you have completed your FNIS profile, because if you complete your FNIS profile, we can determine if, certain types of non-immigrant statuses qualify for different exclusions. But we have to have all the information necessary, right? So that's a good question. And then I think I had a question over here. Yeah.
So, I heard that even
When you do the I-9, you have to say what your SSN number is, but there's an option to say that you have applied for it. So even if you haven't applied for it, you click the box that says, I have applied for my SSN. It's the I-9 employment eligibility. And the other thing to know about that document is that it's going to ask you for your work authorization end date. And then for on-campus employment, that's the end date on your I-20 or DS 2019. So those are the two things to remember about the I-9 process.
is there a deadline for the
So the sooner you can get it to us, the better, because we can try to get it, processed as soon as possible so that your payments are getting withheld where they're supposed to, right?
just sorry to have to
It is not necessary. So you will just check similar to the I-9, just simply check the box that you have applied for a social security number and proceed with your application.
clarify what is the thing that we need to do before obtaining an employment letter? Is there anything to do?
Just get the job. Get the job, get the employment letter, get that on letterhead, upload it to ISSA. Yeah. Yeah.
Is there a time limit for us to apply for SSN after we get this job?
So you will want to apply for it before the end of this calendar year, because it will impact your ability to get taxed appropriately in January to file in January. So we would just generally recommend, if you have a job this fall, make sure that you have the application and you have the SSN before the end of the calendar year. I think that's
I always
best
recommend.
practice, yeah.
Yeah, the sooner in the semester you can go, the better. The weather starts changing. You don't want to be going all the way to downtown. Just get it done.
There's no reason to wait. Except for there's fun things happening. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. So there's two ways to answer it. If you are a J1 student, you have to have authorization from our office before you start working. You can start working before you have the SSN. So that SSN doesn't prevent you from beginning to work. If you are an F1 student, you don't need the authorization, so you can just begin working, and then you just want to apply for the SSN as quickly as possible. In both cases, but yeah, J1, you just need the authorization first from our office. No, so if you're a J1 student, then you have to have an offer letter in order to ask for the authorization. So I processed 3 authorizations today with today's start date. And so those students had a future start date. So you can't say, I'm going to start working tomorrow. You have to wait. You might say next Monday, right? And then you submit that to ISSA and we authorize you to start next Monday. But you have to get a letter from our office if you're a J1 student. It literally says, hey, you've been authorized. Here's this letter to show your supervisor. You're going to see how. No, go to ISSA link, and there's an on-campus work authorization form that you will upload your employment letter to, and then we will process, we'll put it on your SEVIS record, and then we'll send you the letter via email. You don't have to come to our office at all, it's all electronic. Yeah, I see one back there. It's offer letter. Yep. We do, it's linked in this link, yes. Okay. It is linked there, and it's also, we do love sending people to our website. It makes us very happy when we see that you've gone to our website. But I'll just pull it up really quickly. So Life in the US, look at all these amazing resources. They will change your life. We're gonna come down here to this handy chart. And this is the template. It is currently not on letterhead. It has to be on letterhead when you submit it to our office. And your supervisor is going to fill it out and just confirm that you're working less than 20 hours a week, etc. Okay, and then we will provide our own letter. I don't think it's gonna let me go in. Maybe it will. Oh, I know. This is like quite the thing. I don't think I'm actually registered. Nope, I don't have it because my account is fake. Yours will say SSN letter request if you've done the registration.
So while we're also talking about the question of, well, can I start working without a social security number? If you start employment and you don't have a social security number, you'll get emails from the payroll department like every week telling you to apply, kind of remind you to apply for a social security number. Because as I said, if you're gonna get that W-2 at the end of the year, and if it doesn't have a social security number on it, we know something's wrong, right? Because if you're working, you should be eligible for a social security number, and then like you should be able to, we try to match up. They really do a really great job. If you wait to the last minute to get your social security number, you're creating a lot more work if they have to reprint your W-2, and so just kind of put it out there. And I know we had a question over here.
Thanks so much. I just wanted to ask, after we received back the SSN letter from you, from ISSA, and then this application starts, right? Yeah. And when we completed this application, alongside the other documents that was mentioned, like we take this to the office and
Downtown.
it starts, right?
In downtown South Bend, you take everything to downtown South Bend.
All right, so there's no further obligations or.
Once you've gone down to the downtown South Bend office and you've given them copies of everything and you've given them the application, then you're just waiting.
Okay.
And then once you get the card, you do have an obligation, and that's that you have to go to HR. And then you're gonna update your information with the tax office and make sure that everyone on campus has your social security number.
Right, that's maybe some of the ones that will actually. We have to print it, so that would be like, for example.
Yeah, you can type into this and then print it off and you'll take the hard copy, yes, to the Social Security Administration.
All right, thanks.
Yeah. And you're actually gonna pick up from our office that confirmation letter because they want our wet signature on the paper as well. So almost everything's electronic, and then you just stop by our office to pick up that ISSA confirmation letter.
Last bit.
Yep, and then you have a hard copy of your employment letter, hard copy of ISSA, hard copy of this, and a hard copy of your passport, visa, I-94 record. Yep.
Original.
You take the originals, but you should have, copies. Yeah, to leave with them. You don't, you'll have to stop by after you've submitted your employment letter to ISSA link. We will process, we'll send you an email that says your ISSA confirmation letter is ready for pickup. And then you'll come by, pick it up, and you'll leave. You can, and I think, I had to go to the SSA a couple of times, and you have to wait about 40 minutes. So you can make an appointment. If you don't, you've got a couple of hours to kill and sit and read. Then you can just go pop in, but go to the SSAA website, you can set up an appointment. Yes. Yeah, it's required in that form. Yeah. Yeah. She didn't quite get the ITIN number. She applied for it, didn't get it, but I think it's still fine to go ahead and do the SSN now. You have to do the SSN.
So once you're SSN eligible, it will trump any ITIN. Because the ITIN is temporary, so they really want you, if you qualify for the permanent, go ahead and get that social security number.
We'll keep answering questions here, but feel free if you grab, we'll say grab Cynthia, if you've got a specific question, you're like, I don't actually want to ask this in front of everybody. We've got people here who take particular questions, so.
Oh. A little late, so. But I don't know how to do it. Well, that's very.